Righty. So I did the book Ghosting the News, Local Journalism and the Crisis of Democracy by Julia Kirkland. Um, this book was published by Columbia Global Reports in July of 2020. It was selected as an NPR Best Book of 2020 as well. So she starts off with the introduction. Um, and basically, she reveals her own experience with being a journalist. She started at Buffalo News, where she worked as the top editor for 13 years. It was the largest news organization outside of New York City, and Buffalo is in New York State. In recent years, however, American newspapers have cut 45% of their newsroom staff between 2008 and 2017. And as quoted by the book, local reporting that makes secretive town officials unhappy because of what they can't get away with and lets local taxpayers know their money is being spent. So basically, she reiterates that democracy is in jeopardy without local news, and fake news spreads, and therefore there is a loss of integrity without local news. So she describes the idea of news deserts and ghost newspapers, which I will get into later, and the fact that many people are experiencing this lack of proper news because of decrease in funding for newspapers. Many people now rely on non-professionals in order to receive their news, and they often believe that the news will find them if it's important. So they think if they go on Facebook, they'll see what's important in the news just on their feed. Only 1/6 of people pay for local news, and the public does not see the need to pay for these local businesses. There's been a link between local news and good citizenship as well. For example, in 2018, there was a Congress race in which a Democrat candidate ran against a Republican candidate, and that Republican candidate had been charged with insider trading charges. Communities that were less served by the local news network still voted for the man with criminal charges, which shows that they were inclined to fall victim to incorrect news. When local news organizations are closed, municipal borrowing goes up. Um, Additionally, newspaper market shares increase. When newspaper market shares increase, so does citizenship, civic engagement, as well as political accountability. So, in summary, uh, local journalism is important because when it's not there, it polarizes us even more and gives people less incentive to vote, as well as lessens accountability to the public. Um, then we have chapter one, Leaving Buffalo. So the author basically uses her own experience in order to express her concerns over the local news disaster. And in this chapter, she goes back to situating her experience with journalism and her experience at the Buffalo News. It was great at first. This local news organization, it had profit margins over 30%, which is usually what it takes to keep a new organization going. However, the author worked there for 13 years, moved up the ranks from her internship. But when the 2008 recession hit, there was a decrease in print advertising and a decrease in news circulation. And basically, she establishes this as the event that really made the Buffalo News in particular take a turn for the worst. Um, so then in chapter two, called The Unregulated Toll Bridge, basically before the explosion in technology that has happened in our society, advertising was believed to have been this unregulated toll bridge. So print news were able to raise advertising prices at their leisure in order to keep up with costs and inflation. However, nothing good can last forever, and Craigslist was established in 2016 and was used, or 2006, and was used for advertisements. So basically, this marked the fall of the classified ad era. 60% of digital advertising profits go to Facebook or Google currently because Google is able to like serve ads. So they're able to just put them wherever when you're searching for something. And then Facebook is able to control who sees certain ads, and they're also able to charge relatively little for ad space. So basically, online advertisements have completely revolutionized the ad industry because they have precise targeting, and they're unmatched in reach and with their prices in themselves. Local news lost a way to make money with the fall of classified ads, and then private equity companies took advantage of this loss. So private equity companies started buying papers in order to keep them going. Then we have section 2 of chapter 2 called News Deserts, Ghost Papers, and Beacons of Hope. So this chapter brought up examples of news deserts and ghost papers. Among others, she talked about Youngstown, Ohio, which was a news desert. It's known as a crime town, and corruption basically flourishes here, but there's no way to hold political officials accountable because there's no local news establishment in the town. East Lansing, Michigan is also a news desert that she mentioned. However, basically they have this huge university in this town, and they basically stepped in to cover events in the town. But then a woman also started a nonprofit in order to have people who are not necessarily professional journalists write articles for this like nonprofit effort to have a local paper. And then a millionaire bought a local news station in Little Rock, Arkansas, and decided to supply local townspeople with iPads so that he would be able to increase digital sales of this paper. Therefore, you can see there are many big problems in many different area and a diverse set of solutions that people are trying out, but that aren't necessarily working. So then the third chapter, she gets into kind of the global scene. So the author discusses how these problems are seen in a global sense. Pope Francis said in September of 2019 in one of his big speeches right off the bat that his mind was actually on the local news crisis. For example, Italy needed a strong base of local news where when the coronavirus hit, and as evidenced by how it spread, they didn't have that proper local news support system that was covering these events and helping to kind of reduce the spread of the virus. Brazil also faced economic collapse and digital disruption in the past like 5 years. And this caused issues for their country and their local news networks. And then Portugal also saw an uprising in evangelicals buying local radio stations and basically creating political ideological silos across the country. Because of how technology, different finances, and demographics are like different in all of these places, this is not just an issue obviously facing America, but rather facing the world. So then chapter 4 talks about new models and basically ways to curb this kind of small disaster that she addresses in the book. So basically, there have been many different attempts to save local news networks. Big businesses like mentioned in the book, Texas Tribune and ProPublica have increased their services in certain newsrooms in Texas, for example, by raising money through a local festival. And then also nonprofits have also been super helpful in keeping newsrooms afloat. However, nonprofits also will never be able to fight the huge monopoly that is capitalism. And additionally, there have been various different billionaires who have also bought news companies, but this is also not sustainable. And she kind of suggests an idea of funneling government funds into supporting an independent and free local press, but you also get into trouble with like kind of conflicting views and corruption in that way as well. So, in conclusion of the book, newspapers are now dominated by what the author calls have and have nots. Some papers have convinced their readers to buy online subscriptions, like the New York Times and the LA Times has been doing really well, but others have gone bankrupt. Local newspapers have helped bring light to various different incredibly important stories. They really help push for civic engagement up and hold people accountable. In conclusion, if the public is not more aware of the danger that the loss of local news poses for Americans, as quoted in the book, American politics will become even more polarized, government and business corruption will flourish, and the glue that holds communities together will weaken. So basically, my personal thoughts about the book, I really liked it because I thought it was super succinct, and I was able to kind of see the real interesting point that I had no real idea about, really laid out for me with various different examples in a very matter of fact way. And it just like really clued me into an issue that a lot of people probably don't know about that well. So yeah, I definitely would recommend it because it also is a pretty short read. Thanks so much.